A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the year of our Lord 1775. France rolled with exceeding smoothness downhill, making paper money and spending it. Under the guidance of her Christian pastors, she entertained herself besides with such humane achievements as sentencing a youth to have his hands cut off, his tongue torn out with pincers, and his body burned alive because he had not kneeled down in the rain to do honour to a dirty procession of monks which passed within his view at a distance of some 50 or 60 yards. In England, there was scarcely an amount of order and protection to justify much national boasting. Daring burglaries by armed men and highway robberies took place in the capital itself every night. Prisoners in London jails fought battles with their turnkeys, and the majesty of law fired blunderbusses in among them, loaded with rounds of shot and ball. Thieves snipped off diamond crosses from the necks of noble lords at court drawing-rooms. Musketeers went into St. Giles's to search for contraband goods, and the mob fired on the musketeers, and the musketeers fired on the mob. And nobody thought any of these occurrences much out of the common way. In the midst of them, the hangman, ever busy and ever worse than useless, was in constant requisition. Thus did the year 1775 conduct myriads of small creatures, the creatures of this chronicle among the rest, along the roads that lay before them. It was the Dover Road that lay on a Friday night late in November before the first of the persons with whom this history has business. He walked up Shooter's Hill in the mire by the side of the mail, as the rest of the passengers did, not because they had the least relish for walking exercise under the circumstances, but because the hill and the harness and the mud and the mail were all so heavy that the horses had 3 times already come to a stop. 2 other passengers besides the one were plodding up the hill by the side of the mail. All 3 were wrapped to the cheekbones and over the ears. In those days, travellers were very shy of being confidential on a short notice, for anybody on the road might be a robber or in league with robbers. "Whoa!" said the coachman. "So then, one more pull and you're at the top, and be damned to you, for I've had trouble enough to get you to it. Joe?" "Hello," the guard replied. "What o'clock do you make it, Joe?" 10 minutes, good, past 11. "My blood!" ejaculated the vexed coachman. "And not atop of Shooters yet? Yeah! Get on with you!" Once more the Dover mail struggled on, with the boots of its passengers squashing along by its side. The last burst carried the mail to the summit of the hill. The horses stopped to breathe again, and the guard got down to skid the wheel for the descent, and opened the coach door to let the passengers in. "Here, Joe!" cried the coachman in a warning voice, looking down from his box. "What do you say, Tom?" They both listened. "I say a horse at a canter coming up, Joe." "I say a horse at a gallop, Tom," returned the guard, leaving his hold of the door and mounting nimbly to his place. "Gentlemen, in the King's name, all of you!" With this hurried adjuration he cocked his blunderbuss and stood on the offensive. The passenger booked by this history was on the coach step getting in. The 2 other passengers were close behind him and about to follow. He remained on the step, half in the coach and half out of it. They remained in the road below him. They all looked from the coachman to the guard and from the guard to the coachman, and listened. The sound of a horse at a gallop came fast and furiously up the hill. "So-ho!" the guard sang out as loud as he could roar. "Yo there! Stand! I shall fire!" The pace was suddenly checked, and with much splashing and floundering, a man's voice called from the mist. "Is that the Dover mail?" "Never you mind what it is," the guard retorted. "What are you?" "Is that the Dover mail?" "Why do you want to know?" "I want a passenger, if it is." "What passenger?" "Mr. Jarvis Lorry." Our booked passenger showed in a moment that it was his name. The guard, the coachman, and the 2 other passengers eyed him distrustfully. "Keep where you are," the guard called to the voice in the mist, "because if I should make a mistake, it could never be set right in your lifetime. Gentleman of the name of Lorry, answer straight." "What is the matter?" asked the passenger then, with mildly quavering speech. "Who wants me? Is it Jerry?" "Well, I don't like Jerry's voice if it is Jerry," growled the guard to himself. "He's hoarser than suits me, is Jerry." "Yes, Mr. Lorry." "What is the matter?" "A dispatch sent you from over yonder, T&Co." "I know this messenger, guard," said Mr. Lorry, getting down into the road, assisted from behind more swiftly than politely by the other two passengers, who immediately scrambled into the coach, shut the door, and pulled up the window. "He may come close. There's nothing wrong." The figures of a horse and rider came slowly through the eddying mist, and came to the side of the mail where the passenger stood. The rider stooped, and casting up his eyes at the guard, handed the passenger a small folded paper. The watchful guard kept his right hand at the stock of his raised blunderbuss, his left at the barrel. "Guard, there is nothing to apprehend," the passenger declared. "I belong to Tellson's Bank. You must know Tellson's Bank in London. I'm going to Paris on business. I may read this?" "If so be as you're quick, sir." He opened it in the light of the coach lamp on that side, and read first to himself and then aloud, "Wait at Dover for Mamselle." It's not long, you see, guard. Jerry, say that my answer was recalled to life." Jerry started in his saddle. "Well, that's a blazing strange answer, too," said he, at his hoarsest. "Take that message back, and they will know that I received this as well as if I wrote. Make the best of your way. Good night." With those words, the passenger opened the coach door and got in, not at all assisted by his fellow passengers, who had expeditiously secreted their watches and purses in their boots, and were now making a general pretence of being asleep. The coach lumbered on again, with heavier wreaths of mist closing round it as it began the descent. The guard soon replaced his blunderbuss. He called, "Tom," softly over the coach roof. "Hello, Joe." "Did you hear the message?" "I did, Joe." "What do you make of it, Tom?" "Nothing at all, Joe."
That's a coincidence, too," the guard mused, "for I made the same of it myself."
When the mail got successfully to Dover in the course of the forenoon, the head drawer at the Royal George Hotel opened the coach door, as his custom was. He did it with some flourish of ceremony, for a mail journey from London in winter was an achievement to congratulate an adventurous traveller upon. By that time there was only one adventurous traveller left to be congratulated, for the two others had been set down at their respective roadside destinations. Mr. Lorry, the passenger, stepped down, a tangle of shaggy wrapper, flapping hat, and muddy legs. "There will be a packet to Calais tomorrow, drawer?"
"Yes, sir, if the weather holds and the wind sets tolerable fair." "Bed, sir?"
"I shall want a bedroom and a barber."
"And then breakfast, sir?" "Yes, sir." "That way, sir, if you please. Stir about there now."
At the arrival of his breakfast, he said to the drawer, "I wish accommodation prepared for a young lady who may come here at any time today. She may ask for Mr. Jarvis Lorry, or she may only ask for a gentleman from Tellson's Bank. Please to let me know."
"Yes, sir. Tellson's Bank in London, sir?"
"Yes."
"Yes, sir. We have oftentimes the honour to entertain your gentlemen in their travelling backwards and forwards betwixt London and Paris, sir. A vast deal of travelling, sir, in Tellson's and Company's house."
"Yes. We are quite a French house as well as an English one."
"Yes, sir. Not much in the habit of such travelling yourself, I think, sir?"
"Not of late years. It is 15 years since I came last from France."
"Indeed, sir? Well, that was before my time here, sir."
As the day declined into the afternoon, and the air, which had been at intervals clear enough to allow the French coast to be seen, became again charged with mist and vapour, Mr. Lorry's thoughts seemed to cloud too. When it was dark, and he sat before the coffee-room fire awaiting his dinner, as he had awaited his breakfast, a rattling of wheels came up the narrow street and rumbled into the inn yard. In a very few minutes the waiter came in to announce that Miss Manette had arrived from London and would be happy to see the gentleman from Tellson's. The gentleman from Tellson's settled his odd little flaxen wig at the ears and followed the waiter to Miss Manette's apartment. There he saw, standing to receive him by the table between them and the fire, a young lady of not more than 17, in a riding cloak, and still holding her straw travelling hat by its ribbon in her hand. As his eyes rested on a short, slight, pretty figure, a quantity of golden hair, a pair of blue eyes that met his own with an inquiring look, and a forehead with a singular capacity, remembering how young and smooth it was, of lifting and knitting itself into an expression that was not quite one of perplexity, or wonder, or alarm, or merely of a bright fixed attention, though it included all the four expressions, as his eyes rested on these things, a sudden vivid likeness passed before him of a child whom he had held in his arms on the passage across that very channel one cold time when the hail drifted heavily and the sea ran high. The likeness passed away, say, like a breath along the surface of the window-pane behind her. He made his formal bow to Miss Manette. "Pray take a seat, sir," in a very clear and pleasant young voice, a little foreign in its accent, but a very little indeed.
"I kiss your hand, miss,"
said Mr. Lorry, with the manners of an earlier date, as he made his formal bow again, and took his seat. "I received a letter from the bank, sir, yesterday, informing me that some intelligence or discovery respecting the small property of my poor father, whom I never saw, so long dead—" Mr. Lorry moved in his chair, "rendered it necessary that I should go to Paris, there to communicate with a gentleman of the bank, so good as to be dispatched to Paris for the purpose."
"Myself."
She curtsied to him. "I replied to the bank, sir, that as it was considered necessary by those who know and are so kind as to advise me that I should go to France, and that as I am an orphan and have no friend who could go with me, I should esteem it highly if I might be permitted to place myself during the journey under that worthy gentleman's protection."
"I was happy," said Mr. Lorry, "to be entrusted with the charge. I shall be more happy to execute it."
After a pause, he added, again settling the crisp flaxen wig at the ears,
"It is very difficult to begin."
He did not begin, but in his indecision met her glance. The young forehead lifted itself into that singular expression, but it was pretty and characteristic, busy and being singular, and she raised her hand as if with an involuntary action she caught at or stayed some passing shadow. "Are you quite a stranger to me, sir?"
"Am I not?"
Mr. Lorry opened his hands and extended them outwards with an argumentative smile.
"I will, with your leave, relate to you, miss, the story of one of our customers. He was a French gentleman, a scientific gentleman, a man of great acquirements, a doctor."
"Not of Beauvais?"
"Why, yes, of Beauvais. Like Monsieur Manette, your father, the gentleman was of Beauvais. Like Monsieur Manette, your father, the gentleman was of repute in Paris. I had the honour of knowing him there. Our relations were business relations, but confidential. I was at that time in our French house."
"At that time? I may ask at what time, sir?"
"I speak, miss, of 20 years ago. He married an English lady, and I was one of the trustees. His affairs, like the affairs of many other French gentlemen and French families, were entirely in Tellson's hands."
"But this is my father's story, sir, and I begin to think that when I was left an orphan through my mother's surviving my father only 2 years, it was you who brought me to England. I am almost sure it was you." Mr. Lorry took the hesitating little hand that confidingly advanced to take his, and he put it with some ceremony to his lips.
"Miss Manette, it was I."